Hello there. Hi, I'm Ann Heaton. Welcome to Being in the Magic Space, Rituals for Songwriters and Other Creatives. I'm going to give this a little time to um, catch up. Sometimes it takes a few minutes for the feed to come through on YouTube, so I'm just going to give it a few minutes. I can see people jumping on now. Welcome, welcome. Okay, great. So I think the technology piece is working. I just found out that the link I sent out in my email did not work because the email server is doing maintenance. So hopefully you found your way here, maybe through Facebook. And yeah, I just want to welcome you again to Being in the Magic Space. And I'm Ann Heaton, which you probably know. And if you don't, I'm a singer-songwriter, and I absolutely love talking about songwriting, writing songs, being in that space. It gets me really, it's really like my happy place. So today, when I was feeling into what would be of greatest benefit to you, what came up was lately I've been meeting a lot of songwriters who actually have quite a bit of material and have songs that are like 50 to 80% done, but they're feeling a little bit of frustration bringing their songs to completion, to that place where they're like, yes, that's exactly what I mean. It feels great. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about two key ways that have helped me bringing my songs to completion, and what taking apart a poem can teach us about songs. So that's kind of an umbrella under which one of the ways that I've come to finish songs has helped me. So you'll see in a minute what I mean. So, and I'm looking at my notes because they help me, but yeah, so lately I've been talking to some songwriters who maybe are like, the song is not exactly how I want it, but I've just started playing it out live just because I want it to be done and I don't really know what to do with it. And I've totally been in that place, I'm like, I feel a little bit stuck with this. I know it's not quite right, but I'm just going to start playing it out. And then, you sort of get a muscle memory going and you just get used to it being that way. And I want to make a distinction between perfection and authenticity. Like, I feel like we're not going for perfection. There are no perfect songs, and if they are, it's just a matter of opinion, right? But what we are going for is authenticity, like so that you feel like you're telling the story that the way you really want to. And that it's what you really mean. So I was running this morning and likening it to, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like when you're in a relationship but it's not the person you want to marry, but you're like, but this person's nice and they're a good person, and maybe I'll just I kind of want to just hang on to them, even though I know that I'm actually looking for something else. I feel like it's like that with the song. It's like, well, this isn't exactly what I mean, but it's close and it's kind of approximating the feeling. And I'm so afraid I won't find that the song that I want it to be, or find that person I want to be. So I'm just going to stick with this for now. And it can be a very psychologically scary thing to feel like you can't finish songs. And so sometimes, and I've totally done this, I feel like I'll be like, no, it's done. It's done. It's done. I know I can finish the song, even though I know. So before we jump into the poetry exercise, which is super fun, I love it. I thought I'd just share a little bit of my journey in finishing one song, because I know sometimes stories can kind of illuminate things and light bulbs can go off for other people. I have this song called Honeycomb, which you may have heard. And at one point, that song was 7 pages long. And it wasn't even a song. It was just more like a topic, right? The topic of a relationship that ended, how that was sad, you know, why it ended, and all of the beautiful details of what was beautiful about the relationship while it was going by, right? And I feel like there are two things that can happen when you can't finish a song. Like one or two scenarios. Like one is, and there are probably more, but one is when your song is too short. Like you've had this amazing idea, but you're not quite sure how to expand it, right? And you love your idea so much that you're like, well, nothing I could write could be as good. And we talked about that a little bit last week. So, and then the other scenario is where you're just confused, like it's close to what you want, but you haven't had that feeling where you're like, this is exactly what I want to say. Or maybe it's just way too long, like it's 3 or 4 pages, right? So I can share with you a little bit about how I finished the song Honeycomb. So the first thing I did, I was on this retreat with Rose Polanzani up in Maine, and you know, everybody was doing their writing, and some people were socializing and eating, and I was pregnant, and I kept going back to my cabin and being like, no, I want this song to be born. Like, come on, like, what are you? You know, I was getting sort of obsessed. There's this quote from a John Irving novel, Hotel in New Hampshire, that's get obsessed and stay obsessed. And it's in relationship to weightlifting, which I'm not a weightlifter, but I often think of that quote when I'm like really getting hungry for the song to come. And I know it's not totally up to me, but so anyway, I kept hanging out in my cabin and looking at these 7 pages, and I was just like, okay, I don't even know what to do with you. So I decided, all right, you know, maybe this isn't one song, like maybe it's 2 songs. So, you know, I went through and I said, okay, you know what, I'm going to divide out the details and the different phrases that seem to be more related to this theme of the relationship, like what was happening while it was going on. And then I'll pull all these other details and phrases about why it ended over here. Because maybe all that's happening is that I'm trying to put 2 songs into one, and that's why it's not working, right? So I went through this whole process. I filled many more pages and kind of pulled things apart. And what I discovered when I finished that process was that no, that did not feel right, right? Like it didn't feel whole anymore to organize it that way. But what was great about going down that road and allowing myself to experiment and play with it is that now coming back to the song, I had this confidence. I'm like, no, this is one song and these ideas actually go together. And I now know that because I had the experience of pulling them apart and they didn't feel as alive. So no time was wasted, right? And then I was like, okay, so I have these 7 pages, so how will I narrow it down? So the first thing I did was, you know, go through and just with a marker, circle my favorite images, the words that sounded good together. And I pulled those out. Then another thing that I like to do sometimes, which we'll talk about when we do the exercise, is I try to imagine what, if someone else was reading it, what they would be able to get from it. And here's something that may resonate with you, because a lot of times when we're singing, you might write a line, or I might write a line like, I was longing for you, right? And when I sing, I was longing for you, I'm picturing, you know, me in my bed, or, you know, my bed's empty without my partner, or I'm picturing me in a foreign country on a payphone, or me on a road trip with someone who's not present. You know, I'm picturing all these amazing things, but I'm not letting you in on that. I'm just singing, I was longing for you, right? And there's nothing wrong with that line. It's a great line. You could put that in a song. But what I try to do is come back and read and say, what would I get from this if I didn't have those pictures in my head? If I were someone else? And then I say, okay, I would just get, I was longing for you. It's a concept. And as a listener, I might be like, I get that concept. I've heard of it before. And then I ask myself, can I share a little more about what might be playing around up here to kind of bring them in, so that I was longing for you is happening in a place and a time, and they can see images. And of course, people are going to add their own images, but it's like you're giving them a gift, right? You're giving them a place and time to experience the feeling of longing. Because longing doesn't ever happen like outside of time and space, right? That we know of. So that's what I did. And, you know, I went through, there's some images I love in the first verse, which are, so it's fleece, I'll sing it for you. Fleece, the color of your eyes, I couldn't wait to see you wrapped in tears. Piazza Navona, that's a place in Rome, a gift for me. Pastel watercolors, piano keys. So I have the pastel watercolors and piano keys. I loved that. It's very visual. And then I go into the chorus and I'm much more general. I was so in love with you while you were working on the honeycomb. I never felt out of love. Oh, that's not what happens. The honeycomb. I couldn't wait to see what the future would hold. I'd run down the driveway every day. Don't leave the moment, stay. So then the chorus is a little more general. Like, I was so in love with you. We couldn't wait to see what the future would hold. Don't leave the moment, stay, right? But then sprinkled in there are some details like about working on the honeycomb and running down the driveway every day, you know, very concrete, so that those emotions can be happening in a place and time. So, so basically that's what I did. I went through, I circled what felt really alive to me, and if I had too many examples of the relationship, I just picked my favorites or the most poignant, and I pulled out what seemed to be the heart of the matter, like I was so in love with you, and don't leave the moment, stay. Like you were leaving the moment, maybe I was leaving the moment. And then anything that felt really cliche or just abstract or like only I could understand it, I got rid of that. So eventually I was able to get it down to one page, and the song that it is today, which you can go listen to if you want to and know the history. But sometimes I feel like it helps to know what someone else went through on their songwriting journey. So if you are feeling frustration, you can know that that's not the end, right? Okay, cool. So what I'd like to do now is kind of jump into the exercise. And this is something that's really helped me a lot and that I've been able to bring back to my own writing. So here's what we're gonna do. I'd like to invite you to, I don't know if you have a favorite poem or you have a favorite poet, but if you do, you know, if you have a poetry book in your house, I somehow have this poetry anthology, and I have this Soul of Rumi book. If you have something like this nearby on a shelf, I would encourage you to go and get it, and I'll give you a minute to do that. If you have to run upstairs, go ahead, and if not, if you don't think you have a poetry book nearby that might have a poem in it that that resonates with you, there is Google, and obviously we're on the computer. So this book has, I'll just read some of these names: Wilfred Owen, D.H. Lawrence, Christina Georgina Rossetti, Walt Whitman, William Shakespeare, E.E. Cummings, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Where are the women? John Milton. So any poets that you know that you like, or any of those names, or even Rumi, you can just Google a poet, or Google a particular poem, or Google best poems by, you know, Shakespeare or something like that. And yeah, just take a few minutes and select a poem. And I invite you to kind of, you know, maybe not, you don't have to pick the first one you find. We're not in a big rush here. But pick one where the words, you know, feel really alive to you. You're interested in it. You're curious about it. It means something to you. So yeah, if any of you have just joined us, we're selecting a poem for a really fun songwriting exercise. That it's funny because I had a huge aha moment with doing this myself, and then when I started sharing it with other people, it turned out to be one of the favorite exercises that people did. So anyway, we're selecting a poem, and if you can't select a poem, don't worry, because I do have one. I just feel like it's more powerful if you pick it yourself. I love Rumi. I could find like 30 in here. Okay, so hopefully by now you've found a poem. And first I'll take you through how I did this exercise. I'm gonna do a little, I'm gonna do a screen share. So, and then suddenly the Google Hangout is not letting me do a screen share, which is interesting. That's chat, screen share, okay. All right, so hopefully you can still hear me. And here is a screen share of a poem that I once turned into a song. And this is a poem called Two Human-Sized Wedding Candles by Rumi, translated by Coleman Barks. And I came across this poem in my big red book, The Soul of Rumi, one day, just drinking a cup of coffee and, you know, flipping through, and it really caught my attention. And I'll read it out loud to you so you can sort of see what strikes you as I read it. A message comes like honey to your heart. 7 friends and a dog have slept 309 days, with God's wind turning them to rest, on one side, then the other. There's another way of sleeping I pray we avoid, the kind that's running after joy with its grief shadow behind it, or the other persistently trailing grief, meeting chance elation at the corner. Help us to give up back and forth, matter illusion alternating with the mind's calibration of what's good and bad, wet and dry. Anything alligator swallows becomes alligator. 2 human-sized wedding candles walk toward fire. A piece of paper covered with numbers and curving color streaks drops in water, blurs, and flows away. So when I read that, what immediately popped out at me, and maybe you can notice, you know, what it was for you. If there's a line or two that really spoke to you or popped out. For me, it was anything alligator swallows becomes alligator. Maybe because it's so visual and because it involves an alligator. It's a powerful line. And I also really enjoyed the rhythm of the words help us to give up back and forth, matter illusion alternating with the mind's calibration of what's good and bad, wet and dry. That felt really musical to me. And so I just started like singing that in a rhythm. And I thought, I love that. It really jumps out at me. I love the rhythm. I love the alligator line. And it also feels like the heart of the matter. So I thought, well, I'm just going to play around with turning this into a song, and that'll be my chorus. So my chorus will start with the help us to give up back and forth and end with the alligator, which here, I'll go to the next page so you can see. So here's what I made the chorus, right? And I also really liked the meaning of the words. It felt like, there's this place like past duality, like where we don't have to worry about what's good or what's bad or, all this calculating that we do. There's like this space or this silence somewhere that's beyond all that. And so I loved that idea. And I don't want to really interpret the poem because I'm not like a Rumi professor of like Rumi poetry. But so then the next thing I did, and again, I was in a really just a playful state, which was what I invite you to do. I thought, okay, well, great. I have my chorus now. Like, so what's going to be my verse? Like what do I want the opening line to be? So, I could have kept it as it is. The opening line here is a message comes like honey to your heart. But to me, I really liked the line, 2 human-sized wedding candles walk toward fire. Like that felt like a great opening line because, I pictured these, human-sized wedding candles almost like people walking towards a fire. They're embarking on a journey. So that felt like a beginning to me. And in the poem here, it's really the end, right? And so basically I just went through and I rearranged the poem in a way that worked for me. And I created verses out of the lines. Sometimes I kept lines together that Rumi had them, or Coleman Barks had them together, and other times I would divide them up. And then the other thing is that another part that really spoke to me and seemed to kind of stand out on its own, almost as a separate idea, is the lines, there's another way of sleeping I pray we avoid, the kind that's running after joy with its grief shadow behind it, or the other persistently trailing grief, meeting chance elation at the corner. So that sort of seemed to exist almost like outside of the song on its own. And so I made that the bridge, sort of as a separate idea. So I could probably talk about my reasons for doing what I did and whatever for a long time, but and I'll play you what I did in a minute, but I don't want to kind of get in your head before you do the exercise. So basically, I'm gonna leave the poem up in case you don't have your own poem. You'll be able to see. I just had a nervous feeling that screen share was not working, which maybe someone will tell me over Facebook. So yeah, I'm just gonna ask a question. Was that screen share working? Because if it wasn't, I feel very embarrassed, but that's okay. We'll go with the flow. In any case, the screen share now is working. I can see that, so you can see the poem. So I'd like to invite you to take the poem that you've selected, that you feel attracted to, and this poem that I have here is sort of very heady and philosophical, but maybe you chose like a sexy poem or a poem with a lot of action or a modern poem. Whatever it is, that's great. And if you don't have a poem, you can use the one that I have shared on the screen. So first, I'd like to invite you to go through your poem or this poem and circle the sentences or sentence that feels most like the heart of the matter to you, right? And if you can't circle it because it's on the screen, just jot it down on a, journal or on a piece of paper. Yeah, just finding the lines that feel most like the heart of the poem, the heart of the matter. So this could be a really powerful image, or it could be a phrase that seems to sum everything up. You decide. Yeah, and just write that down, what speaks to you. And this is just an exercise in noticing what words you like, what words you're drawn to, and what words you want to hear repeated, right? So after you've circled this phrase or phrases or sentences, just write it down, and this can be your chorus. So you're halfway there. It could be 1 line, 2 lines, 4 lines. You can combine lines from different areas. Okay. Awesome. Great. So the next thing I'd like to invite you to do is to go through your poem or this poem on the screen and choose some lines for your verses. And again, this can be, it's totally up to you, right? There's no right or wrong. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of ways to do this. So I invite you to kind of find what lines feel like verses, and then maybe just start putting them in order, right? So for example, with mine, I really liked the 2 human-sized wedding candles walk toward fire as an opening line because it's very powerful. For you, it might be something else if you're doing this poem, right? You might want to start with the alligator. It's just totally, so just see. And a lot of poems have an arc to them, but I invite you to keep that in mind as well. I shared last week that I watched a documentary called 6 for Sondheim, which is about Stephen Sondheim and the songs he wrote for musical theater. And even if you're not a musical theater fan, some of the gems of wisdom in that movie are really worth checking out. And one of the things he said is every song should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we can talk about this more in a minute, but as you think about how you're arranging your poem, you can think about, okay, we're starting here, maybe in the first verse. In the second verse, we go to this new place, and in this final verse, we're someplace new, which can even just be like, I thought this one thing, then I found out it was wrong, and then now I realize the first thing was right. It's not like you have to travel around the world, but just like you're in a slightly new place. So you can think of that as you work on your poem. Okay. All right, so because I can't see you, I don't know exactly how this is going for you. Feel free to ask me any questions on the Facebook event, and I'll see those, and I can answer them. So yeah, so hopefully that kind of landed with you as an exercise. And what I would say is, if you're not finished, or if it wasn't enough time, I would invite you to continue the exercise after the session's over, and then you can even go on and create a melody for this, and just don't take it too seriously, right? Just like do it quickly and follow your instincts and have fun with it. I've done this with about 20 poems, and no one's ever heard them, but except for this one. And I really feel like it kind of opened up my mind. I'm gonna get rid of the screen share for a second. Stop screen sharing. So, hi, I'm back. So, and as a reminder, we don't do this to necessarily write a song that we're going to put on an album, because a lot of times, you're taking someone else's work and maybe they don't want you to do that. Sometimes if you set a poem that's really, really old, you would be able to include it in your work, which is what I did with that last poem I wrote to the translator and got permission. But do be mindful of that. The good news is it's a great space to practice this flexibility. So, all right, so now that we've done that, now I want to bring it back to our own music. So here, I'll just play you a little bit of the chorus, because sometimes I feel like music speaks louder than talking. So this is my chorus. Help us to give up back and forth, matter illusion alternating with the mind's calibration of what's good and bad, wet and dry. Anything alligator swallows becomes alligator. Yeah, so it's just fun, and it's so fun to like sing somebody else's words, right? And like, I would never write that in a million years. I could never even think of it, right? But it's so fun to like take it on and take it in and sing it. Especially as someone, I love writing words. So, all right, so the next step of this is that I want to encourage you to now take this process to your own songwriting, right? And I'm just going to take a drink and I'm getting text messages, so I don't know if they're telling me that the screen sharing is not working. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so what I would invite you to do next is if you are one of the songwriters who has a song that you've been stuck with, and it's not done, or it's not quite how you want it, to do a couple of things. One, you can do some of the things we talked about last week, which is just like record your song and play it back for yourself while you're doing something else. So you can kind of be pulled by what you most like, right? Or go and write more, right? Like the backstory of the song. Write about what you're not saying in that song, what you've purposefully excluded, explore a little more that way. This week, I want to invite you to just take this process we did with the poem and apply it to your song. So you take your song, and the good news is that we're not painters. So like if you painted a painting and then you wanted to change it, you'd have to paint over it and then it's lost, right? But with the song, like it can stay intact. It's like with kids, they build a tower and then they knock it down, and I feel like as adults, like we hang on a little tighter. So you have your song, it's not going anywhere. Make a copy of it, put it next to it, and then just say, I'm just doing this as an exercise, and I have nothing to lose. So now this is not for a song that you love or are about to finish. This is for a song that you feel stuck with and you want to explore to see if you can finish it. You feel like the ingredients are there, but something's not quite right. So you take this second copy of your song and just play around with it, you know, rearrange the verses. Maybe put the last verse first. Maybe just look at the lyrics and circle the lines that feel like they're really the heart of the matter. And see if those lines are actually your chorus or if they're in some other part of the song, right? Just play around with it, move things around, be open, and see what happens, right? And this flexibility, while you may not create something that's better than what you have or more what you mean, you might. And if you don't, you will have like flexed this flexibility muscle, and you'll sort of train your brain to think this way when you're initially writing. And it can only serve you. I promise. Like, having that flexibility when you're first having ideas, or like, oh, this could be a pre-chorus, is an amazing feeling. And ultimately, to really trust yourself, you know, and trust life and trust the process of play. So that's the first way, tip I'm sharing for how to bring your songs to completion if they're ones that you've been stuck on. And the second tip I'm going to share is, and you know, there are hundreds of ways to approach finishing songs, and I encourage you to check in with yourself first to be like, what's next? You know, because ultimately you know the answer better than anyone else. But another way that I'd like to talk about is co-writing. And I kind of really want to talk about the beginning, middle, end thing that Stephen Sondheim talked about. Maybe we'll come back to that at the very end. So when I was first writing songs, I was not open to co-writing. I was not even really open to feedback, because I was just so nervous that I really needed to be able to find my own point and get it across, right? So I find that usually the people who are not open to songwriting are, open to co-writing, is because they're still searching for what they really mean, and they know that only they can find it, right? So if that's you and it's more of an internal discovery process, then you probably really need to stick with that, right? And you don't want to open it up because somebody might be like, oh, I have this other idea, and it's not at all what you're searching for. But if you have a song where you feel like it is what you mean, it has all the ingredients, you know what you want to say. There have been a couple songs of mine where I had it about 80%, but I just wasn't sure if it was quite coming across. So like with Watching You Win, you came to Earth on a comet from the blazing blue, landed like a superhero in our school. And it goes on. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. But I felt like I almost had it, but I wasn't sure if it was coming across. The chorus is, I like watching you win. I like watching you win, right? So I called my friend Neil, or I emailed him. Neil's a great like pop songwriter. And I was like, okay, here's this song. I really love it, but am I saying this thing that I'm trying to be saying or not, you know? And then he's like, I'll get back to you, right? And then I had this other song, I Still Love You. And I felt similarly, you know, like it's pretty much what I meant, but what was it coming across? So I sent him both of those songs, and it was amazing because he got back to me with great feedback. He made a few like lyrical changes in Watching You Win, and then with I Still Love You, I can actually share what he told me about this song. So this song, the first verse is, I still love you after all this time. I still love you though you are not mine. People get over it. And I know they're wrong, but I can live with that. And then I went straight to the chorus. I can live without you, just not without loving you. So I let you go, even though I'm still loving you. Okay, so I went from verse to chorus, and that's, something that you hear, like, get to the chorus as quick as you can, because that's the hook, and you want people to kind of know what it is. And he said something surprising, especially from someone who writes pop songs. He said, I think you need another verse. You need to kind of tell the story a little bit more, like set the scene a little bit more. And so then it went from I still love you after all this time. I still love you though you are not mine. People tell me I'll get over it, and I know they're wrong, but I can live with that. I still love you like a fairy tale, sweet old story, but it isn't real. I don't need you to be a part of it, but it's a part of me, and I make peace with it. I can live without you. Okay, so then it goes to the chorus. So two things happened in adding that verse. One is you get a little more of the story, like I still love you like a fairy tale, like it was this ultimate love, and maybe it wasn't real, but it was real to me. You understand a little bit more about this love that she's letting go of. And that's one. And two is that you have to wait a little longer for the payoff. So there's a little bit more satisfaction when the chorus comes. You're like, oh, now I'm in the chorus, right? And my point is not so much particular to what changes happen. It's more to the fact that by me opening up to someone else's perspective, I heard he presented something I probably never would have thought of, even though I've been writing songs for years, like that particular solution I would not have thought of. And it felt great, right? So kind of to recap, if you're somebody that's writing and you're more like exploring and mining yourself, and you know that what you're looking for, no one else can really find. I mean, maybe they can help you by asking you questions, but you really hold the answers, and that's the space you're in with your song, then you may want to just keep working on it yourself, right? But if you feel like you have most of the ingredients, you know your message, and you just want to make sure it's coming across in a way that other people can connect in, from where you're sending it, then I invite you to do this. It's, when it works, it can be great. It's a little bit scary. Because again, that feeling can come in, like you just want to be done with it. You want someone to say like, it's amazing and fantastic, and they totally get it, right? But there's another part of you that's like, knows, right? Because when you play it out, you're like, there's something not quite right about that, right? So there's a psychological aspect that, like, a little bit of a hurdle, but I encourage you to just experiment and walk through that. And anytime someone gives you a suggestion or helps you with your song or adds a verse, you don't actually have to take that suggestion, right? So yeah, I guess that's most of what I wanted to share. So I'll recap the first part. I encourage you to find a poem, turn it into a song, find a couple poems and turn them into songs, and see what you notice about what kind of sentences you like, what you like to hear repeated, the sounds of the words, what rhythms you like. Yeah, and consider allowing someone you trust to give you feedback or even write with you. And lastly, I think I'll touch a little bit, sometimes some of these messages are so simple that it almost feels like silly to say them, but I do feel like I hear enough songs that don't do this, that I think it's worth mentioning. And okay, I'm gonna check the Facebook page again just to make sure everything's working. Cool. And again, if you have any questions. Oh, I see. So Sarah asks, can it be one of our own poems? I mean, absolutely. Absolutely can be one of your own poems. I mean, the thing that's interesting about it being, that's helpful about it being someone else's poem, is that you can find what you love about words that are not your own. You have this like witnessing observational quality, right? Because remember I talked earlier about writing lyrics. When we write lyrics, oftentimes we have all these pictures in our head of what actually happened, or we're visualizing something. And so you might do that with your own poems as well. Whereas if you set someone else's poem, you don't know what they were thinking other than what they're sharing with you. So you can really feel what words resonate with you when you don't have that inside information. So Sarah, for you, I would recommend doing that with someone else's poem first, and then coming back and doing it with your own poems. And you say, what if you love music but are not musical? Yeah, so that's maybe a longer question, and maybe that's something I could touch on next week. I'm wondering if you mean like how to create a melody. So if that's the question, let me know, and then I can address that next week. Okay, so one last thing. I'm going to just share a song I wrote last drive, because I was thinking about what Stephen Sondheim said about every song should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it doesn't have to be in a traditional sense, like the beginning is she starts out on an escapade, and then she goes to Machu Picchu and climbs it, and then she has this amazing spiritual experience, and then she comes back and she's a different person. It doesn't have to be in physical space, but when songs stay in one place, they can get a little bit boring. Like by the third verse, you're like, yeah, I got it already. So I'll play one of my songs where this happens a little bit, just to kind of give you something to chew on and think about when you're writing your own song. So this is called Last Drive, and it's a song about my grandfather. And when he was nearing the end of his life, he wanted to go on a last drive around his town, just to see everything again and point out some of these places to my brother who was giving him the drive. So I called my brother to say, what were some of the things he shared with you? This was years later, and he didn't remember specifically. So I interviewed my dad and said, what might Grandpa Joe have said on this drive? And what might he have pointed out to my brother? And then I remembered some of the stories my grandfather had told me when he was alive. So this is verse 1. I flew planes in World War II. Over the ocean we made loops. I saw my mother's face in the sky. I was only 18 when she died. Won't you take me for a drive? Won't you take me for a drive? Last drive, last drive. You want to take the wheel while I wave goodbye. Okay, so first verse is, I flew planes in World War II over the ocean. We made loops. I'm establishing that he's, was in World War II, talking about his history. I saw my mother's face in the sky. I was only 18 when she died. So we know a little bit about him and who he was growing up, right? Next verse is, so then the chorus is, won't you take me for a drive, last drive, last drive. So you have this idea of the drive. Then the next verse, we move forward a little bit. I'll show you, I gotta sing it, sorry. I'll show you the hill where my parents are buried. My father, Jerome, my mother, Nellie. The library stands where our grocery used to be. In the Depression, my father gave out food for free. Okay, so what's happening now? So we're no longer in the past. Now we're in the present. Now we're on the drive, you know. I'll show you the hill. You know, it's right up here where my parents are buried. There's the grocery, or there's the library is where the grocery store used to be that my grandfather ran. So he's giving the history. We're on the drive with them. So we've moved in time. So we're in a new place. And then last drive, last drive, last drive is the chorus. And the final verse is we get some new information that we don't have yet. I mean, I told you that this was my brother and my grandfather, but I haven't told you that in the song yet, right? So now we're in the last verse, which is, there's the hill where your father used to play, the field the boys set on fire one late summer day, the hall where your grandma and I danced the night away. I hope she's waiting for me when I get to heaven's gate. Okay, so that last verse does a couple of things. It establishes who everybody is in relationship to everybody else. You know, that this is the grandfather, and he's saying, you know, your father used to do this, my son, and now I'm mentioning your grandmother, which shows that you're my grandchild. So we know who everybody is, and you know, then it ends with, I hope your grandmother's waiting for me in heaven, right, when I go. So we know, like, he's about to go. This is the end of the drive, and then it goes to the chorus. You know, won't you take me far adrift? You take me for a drive, last drive, last drive. You take the wheel while I wave goodbye. Last drive, last drive. You take the wheel while I wave goodbye. Okay, so there's a little bit of a trajectory there. So, you know, you have the first verse, the past, the middle verse is they're on the drive, and the third verse, they're still on the drive, but you know who everybody is, and you kind of know that he knows that he's at the end of his life, and you sort of end with that idea that I'm hoping that I will see my wife again. I'm hoping that that is something that I believe and that will be true, right? And yeah, so that's one example of a way you can use the beginning, middle, end. And it's not something that I ever thought of consciously until Stephen Sondheim said it in the movie that I watched a week ago on a flight back from San Francisco. But it's something that I sensed, you know, that you want there to be some motion in the song. And I'm sure that's something that all of you sense. But sometimes it's nice to just have that little tool. In case something is not the way we love it, we can say, well, is the story moving forward, or, you know, where are we going, or what's the arc? Where are we traveling at all, or are we just staying in one place? So yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today, for being in the magic space. And I was kind of winging this one. I like to sort of just tune into what people might need. So I would love to hear from you if any part of this was particularly helpful, if you had any sort of aha moments, or what your experiences have been in bringing songs to completion. What has worked for you? What has been successful? and what has felt really, really good. So if you feel like sharing that with me over the Facebook page, that would be great, because then other people can learn from your wisdom as well. So we'll see you. We're doing one more of these next Thursday, and I hope to see you then. Okay, peace and happy songwriting, and I believe in you. Bye.